Welcome back, Giants fans. With free agency fast approaching, I figured I would do an updated video on where the Giants currently sit with their roster and their cap situation. Now, we all know the Giants have a ton of holes to fill and not a lot of money to do it with. Let's start with the holes that they have. We'll start with the offensive line. The hog mollies, as Dave Gettleman likes to say. On the left side of the line, we are set. There's no way you're cutting Solder. He's here to stay with that contract. And, of course, Hernandez. So the left side is set. The rest of the line, we don't know yet. They don't have a center currently on the roster that is starting. They don't have a guard, and they don't have a tackle. Now, more than likely, they will bring back Jalapeno and Jamon Brown. That is what I suspect will happen. And right tackle, they will either have to address in the draft or free agency. But we will get to that in a second. The quarterback, sounds as if Eli Manning is going to come back. We will talk about in a bit what they can do in terms of restructuring his contract, because they certainly need to if they want any chance to contend in next year's season. The running back, we know Saquon Barkley. We don't need to talk about that. The receiver, same thing. So on the offensive side of the ball, the holes that they need to potentially fill are on the offensive line, and that's about it. But it's 3 spots. Now on the defensive side, the defensive line, I don't think that they're going to allocate many of their resources to spend on the defensive line. They have some young players there. Dalvin Tomlinson, B.J. Hill showed that they can play. Their biggest problems are not on the defensive line. Linebacker, we have Alec Ogletree. We have B.J. Goodson in the middle. We have Lorenzo Carter on the outside. And, of course, Olivier Vernon. We will get to their cap situations in a bit. And then in the secondary, we know the holes there. The corners, I think Jenkins will be back with his big contract. And Sam Beal, the guy that we used a third-round draft pick on last year who got hurt. I think Beal will be the other starting corner. They may draft a corner for some depth later in the draft, but I think they'll be the 2 starting corners. Safeties, with Collins gone, we don't know what the hell's going on. So, in terms of the defense, I think they could use a pass rusher in free agency. I don't know if they're going to have the money to do it, and they certainly could use some help at the safety. So, where the cap currently sits, they have $26 million to spend, according to Sport Track, but that does not take into account the draft, which they project will be $10 to $11 million. So we say that they're going to have $15 million to spend. So let's take a look at the offensive line. As I said earlier, there are 3 holes on that offensive line. I think Brown and Jalapeno will be back. They have some kind of option with Jalapeno where it's going to cost them about $1 million to have him as the starting center. We all know that Gettleman likes him. He only played 2 years before he got hurt, but I think Jalapeno, in my opinion, will be the starting center, with potentially a guy that they draft in the 4th or 5th round that could compete with him going into training camp. But I see them spending about $1 million there on him and about 3 to 4 on Brown to be the guard. And same situation, they may draft a guy to compete with him as well. But I see both those guys coming back for approximately a combined cost of $5 million, which knocks our cap space down from 15 to 10 before we even look at outside acquisitions. Now you need a right tackle. A lot of people think that they will bring in Darrell Williams from the Carolina Panthers. He's going to cost about that $10 million. So let's just say they do that. Now we have no cap space to do anything else. So we've shored up the offensive line, but $0 anywhere else. So that is why we are going to either need to make cuts or restructure some contracts. Now what I did was I looked at the top 10 highest paid players on the roster. These 10 names make up approximately $118 million of the salary cap. And they're going to need to find some savings here between these players if they want to address some of the needs on the defense. When you look at the names, you have Eli Manning, Odell Beckham, Olivier Vernon, Nate Solder, Janoris Jenkins, Alec Ogletree, Saquon Barkley, Kareem Martin, Rhett Ellison, and Evan Ingram. We'll start with the players that I don't think they will be able to make any adjustments with. Evan Ingram at the bottom of the list, not going to be able to make any adjustments. He makes just under $3 million. He's still an affordable playmaker. He's here to stay. Saquon Barkley, same thing. Kareem Martin, unfortunately, the same thing. He makes almost $6 million, but he carries almost a $4 million dead cap hit. So you're not going to be able to do anything with him. So those 3 players are off the list. Janoris Jenkins, I think, is here to stay. They're too thin at the cornerback position, and it's $14.75. Well, he is overpaid. The $7 million dead cap hit is too much. That's 4 players. Solder's here to stay, of course, with his contract, is 5 players, and Beckham. You're not going to be able to do anything with him. That leaves us with the 4 people that I said in my previous video, and they're going to need to figure something out, because right now they have $0 when you factor in the money that they're going to have to spend on the offensive line if Darrell Williams is coming here, which it seems as if he is. Everyone seems to think that way. So what can they do to give themselves enough money to go out there and add a safety and potentially a moderate pass rusher? Well, you start with Eli Manning. His $23 million salary is ridiculous at this point in his career, and I love Eli Manning. He's my favorite player ever, but he's a game manager, and he will need to restructure his contract. If he does not restructure his contract, this team has zero chances next year, and I hate to make him the villain, but at this point in his career, he needs to sacrifice. We've seen great quarterbacks do it throughout their entire career. Tom Brady does it all the time, and if Eli Manning wants to win at his age, he needs to restructure that contract. So they're going to need to shed at least $8 to $10 million off that contract. I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm not a financial advisor, but Eli Manning needs to restructure that contract. Now, if they're able, well, let's be conservative and say they're able to save $8 million off of restructuring Eli's contract, whether it be extending him a year and having the ability to cut him next year, whatever it's going to be. But let's say they're able to save 8, so that gives us $8 million to spend. That's probably enough to bring in a decent safety, one decent safety. Is that all you're going to want? And if it is, okay. But I don't know if that's enough. So what else can they do? If they plan on going out there and drafting Devin White, which we don't know what they're going to do, they very well may draft Dwayne Haskins, which I think will happen if he's there at 6. But if they plan on drafting Devin White, I think it makes all the sense in the world to cut Alec Ogletree. Alec Ogletree would save you $6 million. That $6 million still wouldn't be enough to get a legitimate pass rusher, but it would be a start. I'm going to go off the assumption that they're keeping Ogletree. The one guy that they could cut out of those 4 is Vernon. If you cut Vernon, you save $11 million. And maybe if you tinker the roster a little bit, you're able to save about $14 or $15 million, and you'd be able to bring in a pass rusher that way. The only way I'm doing that is if you're getting a guy who's young, 26, 27 years old, with a high upside. Otherwise, I stick with Vernon for one more year. But the way I see it, to be completely honest with you, the way I see the free agent situation when I really looked at the cap, I think we'll address the offensive line. I think we'll bring in Darrell Williams. That's my prediction. And I think on the defensive end, the only real impact player they're going to bring in is the guy who replaces Collins. I don't see much else. Maybe you could bring in a moderate pass rusher. I think Vernon's here to stay, and until I see them cut him, that's what I think is going to happen, because especially with all the big names that have fallen off at the pass rusher position, that $8 million cap hit, I mean, you're not going to find a pass rusher on the open market, in my opinion, that's as good as Vernon. Even though he gets hurt a lot, I think they stick with Vernon for one more year, and I think that they're going to restructure Eli's contract, but the only real impact player I see them bringing in is a safety. Now, what safety is it going to be? I've been a proponent of bringing in Amos. Maybe they could bring in 2 safeties, one for $3 or $4 million, like a Weddle and an Amos, and that's how they use the cap money. But they're not going to be able to go out on a spending spree. I'm just bringing a realistic approach. We don't live in Disneyland. So I think that they will bring in a safety, Darrell Williams, shore up that offensive line with Jalapeno and Brown, and that's what we're going to do. And we're going to have to try to fill up the rest of the holes in the draft. Hopefully you can find a good pass rusher, whether it be the first round, second round, trade up to the third, whatever it's going to be. And they're certainly going to need to address the safety position. What they could potentially do in this draft is trade back up into the end of the first round and get yourself a Deontay Thompson, an Adderley. That could be the approach they take. That may be the smartest approach if you can get an impact safety at the end of that first round, because they're going to need to find a way to fill these holes. And Eli Manning, man, I hate to make you the villain, but if you do not take a pay cut, this defense is in a lot of trouble. So that is where they currently stand, and Giants fans may not want to hear that. Everybody wants to talk about Earl Thomas and this guy and that guy. It's not going to happen, guys. We got to be realistic. But as always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Tell me what your approach would be. What would you do? Let's think realistic, Giants fans. Let's not talk about just cutting this guy, this guy, this guy. Because remember, every guy you cut is another hole you got to fill. As always, cheers.